This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Vote counting begins in Uganda's presidential election. Gunmen kidnap mothers and babies in Nigeria's Kaduna state. And researchers detect a COVID-19 variant unique to Kenya. Hello and a very warm welcome to Africa Live on CGTN. I'm Lindy Mtongana in Nairobi. And with me is Uche Okoronkwo with a preview of your business news.
Thank you, Lindy. And here's a look at what's coming up on Africa Live Biz. Zimbabwe hits its fourth straight trade monthly surplus in November. And Nigeria set aside $31 million to boost its poultry sector. Of course, all that coming up within the program. For now, it is back to you, Lindy.
Thanks, Uche. Well, we start the hour in Nigeria, where at least 18 people have been kidnapped in the latest raid by gunmen in the northern state of Kaduna. The attackers are said to have stormed Mando village in Gwari area on motorbikes in the early hours of Wednesday. Residents say the gunmen looted food items and later led abductees into a bush. It's not clear who carried out the attack, but kidnap for ransom is especially common in this region. Just last month, gunmen abducted more than 300 schoolboys from their dormitory in neighboring Katsina state. They were later released after days of negotiations. Security forces say they are currently investigating this latest incident. Well, let's bring you more on this now. We're joined by CGTN's Deji Badmus, live for us in Lagos. Deji, certainly very disturbing developments coming out of Nigeria today. Kidnapping of mothers and babies. What more can you tell us?
Well, Lindy, quite disturbing indeed. And that area, Gwari local government area in Kaduna State, that's the northwest of the country, is actually notorious for kidnappings and kidnappings on a large scale like the one we have seen now. Well, as you have said, the attack actually happened in Mando. And what is actually surprising is that that local government area, because of its notoriety on kidnapping, the military had to cite an Air Force base there. So people are asking questions as to why the Air Force did not intervene in this case, because we understand the gunmen were shooting sporadically in the air to scare people. And the thinking of the locals is that some military guys around the area, especially close to where the Air Force base now is, should have had these gunshots and there should have been some intervention. For now, the government has actually not said anything yet. No arrest has been made. And of course, none of the relatives of those who have now been kidnapped now have been contacted for ransom payment. But everyone believes this kidnapping has to do with ransom payment, because that area, as I said, is actually notorious for kidnapping for ransom. I guess there will be some kind of contact before the end of the day or in the days to come. But questions are still being asked as to why there was no intervention at all from the security agencies, even though there is an Air Force base in that same local government area where this incident happened. Lindy?
And so you mentioned, Deji, that kidnap for ransom is notorious in this area, but why is it happening so frequently? And how does government intend to respond?
Well, one of the things that the government is doing is to deploy security agents now to different parts of the country, especially in the north of the country. And it's actually the reason why an Air Force base, it's an Air Force field now, it's a small Air Force base now, was actually established in that local government area, Gwari, because it's notorious for kidnapping, as I said. So it's part of the strategy that the government has been using, but obviously in some cases the strategy does not appear to be working, as we have seen in this case. And then there's no question at all that the military lacks enough men and resources to be able to to be able to monitor everywhere in the north. We're talking about vast areas of land, so it's difficult to deploy the security agents now in every part of not just that local government area, but across the northern part of the country. And that is what these bandits and even insurgents are actually taking advantage of. So what they do is they look at locations where you do not have security presence. They carry out attacks there, hit and run attacks if you like. So by the time they are gone, the military will show and then nothing happens. So it's a tough one, and what the government is also trying to do is to recruit more security personnel and ensure they are deployed to various parts of the country. And there's no question at all that in some cases the military actually does intervene and actually gets people arrested, even kills some of these criminals. But the truth is that the situation with abduction in that part of the country, it's quite overwhelming, so it seems. And somehow the security agents have not been able to crack it.
Well, indeed, those gaps in law enforcement have disastrous consequences for civilians. Thank you so much, Deji Bedmus, live for us there in Lagos. Now let's turn to elections in Uganda. Vote counting is now underway in the country's highly contested polls. However, the country is currently under an internet blackout after telecom operators suspended services on the eve of the election. Incumbent President Yoweri Museveni is seeking a sixth term in office. He is being challenged by 10 candidates, including popular musician turned opposition frontrunner Robert Chagulani Sentamu, also known as Bobby Wine. Campaigning, which began in November, was marred by violence. Clashes occurred between police and opposition supporters. The United States has cancelled its observation of the vote, citing that its accreditation requests were denied. Museveni's spokesperson has said the African Union and East African Community would deploy observers instead.
Ugandans adhere to COVID-19 protocols as they came out in their numbers to vote. Police officers meanwhile patrolled the city streets to ensure security was upheld. The hotly contested presidential election pits longtime leader Yoweri Museveni against popular singer-turned-politician Bobby Wine.
Everyone who is here supports the old man, and now people say that the old man has done something bad. I do not understand what that is. At this moment, everyone that was here supports him, and he will improve things here. He is Museveni, Yoweri Kaguta Museveni.
Voting closed at 4 p.m, with voters already in line allowed to cast their ballot after the cutoff.
Museveni has ruled for a long period, so we want a change.
For me, my vote, the one I've just put in, I expect it to count very much on my future as an individual. And as you see me, we are just looking at the change. We are looking forward for the change.
Ugandans are expecting to know the outcome of their vote within 48 hours of polls closing. Joy Kiruki Juma, CGTN.
And now to the ongoing unrest in the Central African Republic. Rebel forces have been repelled after mounting their closest attack yet to the capital, Bangui. The United Nations says one peacekeeper was killed in the process. Now, this latest attack follows a rebel offensive launched to disrupt a presidential election held at the end of last year. Here's CGTN's Joy Kiruki once more.
Deserted streets and a heavy military presence on the outskirts of Bangui. This after an attack that the UN says happened at a MINUSCA position 12 kilometers from the capital. Many have fled the area, fearing another attack.
When I woke up around 5 a.m., I too heard gunshots and I was scared. I told them to wait for me so I could see things, and I told them I would find them. Then they left without turning back. So far, I don't know where my family is, how they are going to leave. And with everything happening, we who sell stuff to be able to eat, that's how we make a living. But with all that's happening, how can we sell things? How can we find something to eat in these times? We don't want this.
The UN Secretary General has strongly condemned the attack in which a Rwandan peacekeeper was killed.
The Secretary General expresses his deepest condolences to the families of the deceased peacekeeper, as well as to the people and government of Rwanda. He wishes a speedy recovery to those injured. The Secretary General recalls that attacks against UN peacekeepers may constitute a war crime. He calls on the Central African authorities to take all necessary measures to ensure accountability for these heinous attacks.
A month earlier, rebels launched an offensive vowing to march on the capital ahead of December's highly contested election. President Touadéra termed it an attempted coup orchestrated by the help of his predecessor, Francois Bozize, who denied the charge.
The Secretary General remains very concerned over continued destabilization efforts by armed groups in the Central African Republic and calls on all parties to stop violence and engage in meaningful dialogue. He commends the continued engagement of the UN peacekeepers and their efforts to protect civilians and preserve national stability. The Secretary General reiterates the commitment of the UN working closely with national, regional, and international partners to support the cause of peace in the Central African Republic.
The country slid into sectarian conflict following the overthrow of President Francois Bozize in 2013. Since then, thousands have died and over a quarter of the population have fled their homes. Joy Kiruki Juma, CGTN.
And to the Democratic Republic of Congo, a civil society organization released a report stating that as many as 1,200 people have been killed by militia in the Eastern Territory of Beni since 2019. CGTN's Chris Ochamringa has more.
This report by Lucha came on the same day that another attack, was carried out in Beni territory, an area known as Mwenda. One soldier was killed and 3 others were injured. And the Congolese government forces said, they were pursuing the rebels and discovered a mass grave of 50 civilians and an area known as Lose Lose. And that is, is a very big number of people. So people in Beni territory have been dying on almost a daily basis, and they've been calling on the government to do much more, to end this fighting. It's still not very clear what, the reason of this attack was, but according to a security analyst I spoke to, he said that, the Congolese government troops started carrying out a large-scale military offensive against the Allied Democratic Forces at the end in October 2019. And ever since that offensive happened, killings against civilians have increased across Beni territory. They're saying one reason is that, some of the civilians in that area have been collaborating with the government troops, revealing the hideout of these rebels. And so the rebels have been going out to kill the people. And the killings are very brutal. There have been international monitoring organizations that say the Allied Democratic Forces, which is known as the ADF, is one of the notorious groups. They kill people with machetes, burn homes, and, carry out very brutal killings. So people in that area are really helpless. Last year there was a very large protest against the United Nations peacekeeping mission, whose mandate is to protect civilians. People in Beni were complaining that the UN has more sophisticated weapons and better logistics, to help protect them against these attacks, and they were very disappointed. I spoke to the spokesperson of MONUSCO here in Kinshasa, and he said that the nature of these attacks by the Allied Democratic Forces is very complex. These are people who are farmers by day, and then they become rebels at night. They're people who live within the communities, so it's very difficult to distinguish them from fighters. It's not a conventional war, and so they need the support of the local communities and the government forces to be able to protect civilians.
Let's go to Egypt now, where the demand for medical oxygen has surged, and not just in hospitals. Many households are looking to buy or rent oxygen cylinders for family members with medium to severe coronavirus symptoms. CGTN's Adel Al-Makhrawi brings us more from one of Egypt's biggest oxygen production facilities.
In Egypt, oxygen is now prescribed as an essential in the treatment of all COVID-19 patients. That has spiked demand for the gas, creating a huge gap in the market.
Oxygen consumption in some hospitals increased from 7 to 10-fold.
That has created a black market for oxygen cylinders and gas regulators, which has seen some prices triple. Ministries of Health, Interior, Trade and Industry have created a joint committee to manage the supply gap and launch a crackdown on the black market.
Normally 60% of our production goes to healthcare and the other 40% goes to the industrial sector. Because of the COVID-19 pandemic, we've frozen our industrial deliveries and all our production goes to the medical sector.
The government has instructed all companies producing gases to maximize production capacity. Our truck drivers barely sleep now. Distribution fleets have never been so busy. We had oxygen reserves in our storage tanks. We are now withdrawing from them. There was a gap of 300,000 litres, and that has been quickly recovered with the steel companies joining us.
All major steel manufacturers have been instructed to decrease production so as to lower their consumption of industrial oxygen. Their facilities are now being used to increase the purity of the oxygen for medical purposes. Meanwhile, producers of medical-grade gases are expanding their production lines.
We've built this facility in less than a month since we became aware of the crisis. It is almost completed. We have missing electric panels from the National Electricity Company. They promised us to reduce their usual installation time to a third, but we need them to be even faster. The pandemic is harsh and we must feel the shortage in the market.
The COVID-19 pandemic has highlighted the importance of medical gases facilities in the healthcare system. And because of the sudden surge on oxygen, companies like this one have started to manufacture new facilities that will multiply the production of oxygen gas cylinders, which will be mainly used by individuals. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Well, let's take a short break. Here's what's still ahead on the program. Coming up, researchers detect a COVID-19 variant unique to Kenya. And authorities in Nigeria aim to vaccinate 20% of the population by the first quarter of the year. Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories. Let's have a look. We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis, Cairo,
Juba,
Johannesburg, Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice. Kenya now appears to have joined the list of countries that have detected a new variant of the coronavirus. Preliminary findings were released by the state-affiliated Kenya Medical Research Institute. KEMRI said a study conducted between June and October 2020 in the southeast of the country detected a unique variant. KEMRI, however, admits that more research needs to be done to assess the impact of this variant. Scientists say it is perfectly normal for viruses to mutate. Kenya is approaching 100,000 cases of COVID-19 and over 1,700 deaths. Meanwhile, the WHO reported that the variant identified in South Africa has now found its way into Botswana, Zambia and the Gambia. Africa has surpassed 3 million COVID-19 cases. The WHO said daily case numbers are exceeding the first wave peak. Nigeria, meanwhile, says it's expecting to receive donations of enough COVID-19 vaccines to cover 20% of its population. It says it's working hard to make these vaccines ready during the first quarter of the year. Our correspondent Phil Ihaza has more from Abuja.
The confirmation was made by the chairman of Nigeria's budget office, Ben Akaboeze, during a virtual conference with other government officials while deliberating on the 2021 budget. He did not specify where the donations will come from, but he says it will include at least 4 vaccines approved by different countries across the world. As well as the donated vaccines for 20% of the population, Mr. Kaboise says plans are underway to fund the procurement of at least 50% of its vaccine requirement from this year's budget. Nigeria says the country will get the first 100,000 doses of vaccines between the end of January and the first week of February, without specifying whether these will be donated or purchased by the government. Already plans are underway to come up with a framework for the distribution. The government says once vaccines have been validated by the World Health Organization and the National Agency for Food and Drug Administration and Control, NAFDAC, vaccination will begin with 50,000 frontline health workers. President Buhari has tasked relevant officials to work harder to gain access to these vaccines as the number of cases of coronavirus has begun to rise since late last year. Phil Ihaza, CGTN, Abuja.
Zimbabwe's restrictions on traditional burials to try and curb the spread of COVID-19 have not gone down well, with some citizens saying that these defy cultural norms. They warn these restrictions could have a far-reaching psychological impact.
It's referred to as the one journey on which there are no companions. That reference has become more literal under new guidelines for burials of people that have died from COVID-19. At this funeral, relatives of the deceased are kept several meters away. They didn't get to view the body, which came sealed in its coffin directly from the mortuary to the gravesite. They did not perform some of the traditional burial rites. It's unfamiliar and unbefitting, according to some ordinary citizens.
In our culture, when someone dies, they should be brought into their home one final time and have their gathered relatives and friends bid them farewell appropriately. This is alien to us.
We cannot cut our culture because of the disease and do what other people do in other countries. That is their culture. We should stick to ours.
Some feel the drastic measures, in particular those relating to the handling of corpses, are not justified.
When you go and look at the CDC guidelines, the Center for Disease Control America, it has been shown that the actual deceased body poses very little threat in as far as spreading. As long as you mask up, as long as you sanitize and you ensure that the body remains in the coffin, there is very limited.
Preventing people from bidding farewell in the way they deem fit could have psychological and cultural implications.
People may not have closure to death in that way. Some people, they've even thought that maybe this person's spirit may come back or may not find rest, because you didn't afford the body the chance to get inside the home. You know, Shona people, they've got very rich cultural beliefs. They always attach some meaning between the life of those who are alive and those who are dead.
Government has since said intercity transportation of bodies is allowed, provided they comply with prescribed regulations. An earlier position to ban such travel would have put graveyards in Harare under pressure. Space is already limited here and at risk of running out should the death rate spiral out of control. Farang Wakutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
Malawi continues to welcome back returnees from South Africa as South Africa battles a second wave of coronavirus infections. The Malawian government is mandated to test every returnee to ensure they do not contribute to the spread of COVID-19. But the re-entry process has not been without its challenges, as Daniela Pearson reports.
Malawi is currently processing hundreds of returnees from South Africa. Immigrants coming back voluntarily say they were struggling to make ends meet under strict lockdown regulations.
While in South Africa, we encountered some unbearable conditions. When the lockdown entered the 5th level, many of us were out of work and we could not sustain ourselves. We were getting help from well-wishers. As I speak right now, many more are still struggling.
Returnees were being quarantined at a Blantyre prison facility, but chaos erupted over delays in their release process. About 40 men were arrested.
When we arrived here, they tested us and promised to give us results by 9 o'clock the next morning. We patiently waited for our results after 9 o'clock, and looking at how tired we were and the unexplained delays, people with some ringleaders started vandalism.
They wanted to force their way out, and in the process, it's possible that some of them may have broken out. In collaboration with the Malawi police officers, we have made sure to control the situation.
Other returnees stated that they were happy with the process undertaken by authorities.
Health personnel, the police and soldiers have warmly welcomed us back home. I am so thankful because the government made this arrangement. They tested us and I have tested positive. I am not worried but very happy because I know my status and I will be treated accordingly. I will also follow all the instructions as directed so that I get better.
According to Malawi's Department of Disaster Management Affairs, thousands have made the journey back home since May. Daniela Pearson, CGTN.
A team of World Health Organization experts from various countries has arrived in China. They are there as part of research into the origins of the COVID-19 outbreak. The team is expected to hold meetings with Chinese scientists and conduct on-site visits. Commenting on Twitter, WHO expert Marion Koopman says Asian countries require far more tests than Europe. Malaysia has reported more than 3,300 new coronavirus infections. It was the country's highest single-day rise, bringing the total number to 147,000. Malaysia's health ministry says 7 of the new cases were imported, while 3,330 were local transmissions. Another 15 deaths were reported, bringing the total now to 578. Earlier this week, Malaysia's government imposed new restrictions in the country's most populous states and declared a state of emergency. Well, the capital of northern China's Hebei province is building a centralized medical observation center to combat a coronavirus outbreak. The construction is underway close to the border of Shijiazhuang's Gaocheng district, which is classified as high risk. Our reporter, Ning Hong, visited the site.
The roll of heavy machinery has broken the silence of city. In an open field near Gaocheng district, the center of Shijiazhuang's COVID-19 outbreak, an isolation center is being built.
There are many workers here, and obviously they're going to work throughout the night. And we've just seen that temporary houses and shelters are just being transported in, and we believe that this is going to be a place where to hold people that from the center of this pandemic.
Earlier on Thursday, authorities evacuated 12 villages in Gaocheng district. The people are being relocated to nearby hotels.
If the village is empty, then we can conduct thorough disinfection work of the area, including of the water, waste, and sewage systems.
The isolation center will have around 3,000 wards for medical observation, and a second round of citywide coronavirus testing is underway.
The main purpose of full nucleic acid testing is to identify potential hidden infected people and isolate them for observation to stop the epidemic. The second nucleic acid test should be targeted at the key population. That is, people in high-risk areas should have priority for full nucleic acid testing. Once the results of the second full nucleic acid test come out, we need to see how many positive infections are found. It will determine whether we'll carry out a third or even fourth round of full-scale testing.
The work of tracing the source of this outbreak is still underway. Teams from the CDC are collecting samples and labs are analyzing them in the hope of finding patient zero and the source of the virus. Ning Hong, CGTN, Shijiazhuang.
And let's now go to Uche for your latest business news.
Thank you, Lindy. And coming up on Africa Live Biz. Zimbabwe hits its fourth straight trade monthly surplus in November. And Nigeria sets aside $31 million to boost its poultry sector.
You're watching breaking news on CGTN.
Welcome to the world today on CGTN.
Well, let's start off in Zimbabwe. The country has recorded its fourth straight trade monthly surplus in November. Now, shipments surged 20% to $528.9 million. That is owing to an increase in manufacturing and higher gold, tobacco and nickel sales. Now, this has bolstered the government's plans to devalue and stabilize the local currency, reflecting positive results for exports. Back in June, the government started regular foreign currency auctions in order to support the Zimbabwe dollar. This has placed the local currency on a balance, trading at just over 80 Zimbabwe dollars to the greenback since August. And heading to South Africa now, the country's manufacturing production has declined by 3.5% year-on-year in November. That is down from a growth of 3.2% from September to October. That, of course, is according to the latest data released by Statistics South Africa. Here's CGTN's Angelo Coppola reporting.
The November data suggests that production will remain weak in December and into early 2021. As a result of increased lockdown conditions. Analysts suggest that the economy has lost momentum in recent months after improved data released in Q3 of last year.
I think it's going to be a rough ride in terms of recovery. You already, as you see in the January now, we are in level 3 in terms of lockdown. So obviously there's still disruptions in terms of supply patterns in the production sector from the input point of view. So that's a bit worrying.
The latest headline reading indicates that manufacturing or factory outputs actually declined for the 18th consecutive month. I think more concerningly, on a sort of a adjusted basis, manufacturing was actually down on a month-on-month basis, which is quite concerning. So I think it's quite indicative of manufacturing production, the recovery stalling.
There is some positive news in the monthly data that's been released.
Manufacturing sales continue to grow. If you look at the figure from comparing, let's say, with October, the October figure was 221 billion in terms of rands, in terms of sales. We've moved to 225 billion in terms of sales in November.
The sales of electrical machinery growing by almost 8%, as well as parts and accessories segment for the motor vehicles manufacturing growing 42% year-on-year in November.
The local manufacturing sector is facing severe constraints and impediments, like electricity prices. There's also the question of local demand.
The majority of domestically manufactured goods are consumed domestically, with only about a quarter of them being exported. So I think we also need to work on increasing our global competitiveness.
While the November data is disappointing, it's hoped that the African Continental Free Trade Area will stimulate the local manufacturing sector. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
And heading to Nigeria now, the country has released $31 million in order to boost its poultry sector. Now, the once flourishing subsector was at the brink of collapse following shocks created by the COVID-19 pandemic. Well, as CGTN's Kelechi Emekalam now reports, the loan facility by the Central Bank of Nigeria is aimed at supporting small, medium and large poultry farmers in order to help them recover from the crisis.
Empty bird cages. That's the new reality for Sulham Farms, a poultry farm in Nigeria's capital, Abuja. The farm, owned by Hamidu Usman, has a 15,000 bird capacity and a daily production of 3,000 eggs. But Hamidu's business has been battered by several issues, including costly grains and the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic. He has lost over 70% of his earnings and 80% of his workforce. Now, the government's $31 million loan facility may be what agribusinesses such as Sulham Farms need at this time.
This has gladdened my heart, and I hope it is realizable. It will greatly assist farmers like me to boost our production. As that when finally government decided to disburse this loan, they should please look for actual farmers, not paper farmers. They should go, if possible, visit their farms and see what they have before releasing the loans to them.
The poultry industry is key to Nigeria's economic rebound, accounting for 25% of the agricultural GDP and nearly 10 million jobs. But industry players have raised a fear of a collapse in the sector and badly timed interventions.
So the Nigerian government is very, very reactive. And the interventions that they've given the poultry industry, it's not even a proactive to even improve the produce sector. Now that they are bringing money to the produce sector is because the sector is almost at a collapse.
Though a step in the right direction, the intervention isn't all that's required to redeem the agricultural subsector.
As much as the government can do, the Poultry Association of Nigeria also have a lot to do in educating their farmers on the right system of poultry farming. So government needs to look at all the value chain, from production of the crops to the feed millers to the poultry farmers that will use it, and to also help them to educate them in the best practices.
The government has since placed a ban on its importation in a bid to conserve its forex reserves. In addition to the recent intervention, poultry farmers are asking for a temporary relaxation on the ban in order to reduce the cost of feeds. This is even as Nigeria looks to expand its maize production in the next planting season. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
And shifting focus now, Africa's new intercontinental free trade deal is paying dividends for manufacturing businesses in Ghana. Now, member states are beginning to make inroads into other African markets previously deemed impossible. The African Continental Free Trade Area will likely encourage a competition between African brands. But of course, some Ghanaian companies are seeking the government's support in order to mitigate against the new cost of doing business. Here's CGTN's Nabil Ahmed Rufai reporting from Accra.
Ghana's beverage manufacturing company, Casapeco, is ramping up production. The company is among the first enterprises in the country to export to South Africa under the new trade deal. It's a big moment as the company has struggled to penetrate the East African and Southern Africa markets in the past.
If you look at South Africa, they have a block where they call the SADC. They have quota system that prevents you from entering, and it's been very, very difficult for us. The introduction of this after, if all those bottlenecks or the quota system duty are taken off, we're going to improve on the volume than before. And I think we will have a clearer opportunity to position our brand or our product in the market to compete.
The Continental Free Trade Area aims to remove trade barriers and unleash Africa's economic potential. The hope is that it will lead to a total GDP growth of $3 trillion. Africa's most populous country, Nigeria, is one of the biggest export destinations for this company. When the country shut its land borders in Benin in 2019, which lasted for more than a year to check the smuggling of goods, CASAPERCO says it lost more than $2 million. The spillover effect of Nigeria's action led to a trade dispute with Ghana, resulting in the closure of shops of Nigerian retailers in Accra. Nigeria has now reopened its borders just in time for the implementation of the AfCFTA, and enterprises hope to continue trading in the country.
Key strategy we're looking at now is to kind of still do the direct exporting to the market, and then also we're looking into the future to do kind of a co-packing or a contract partner jointship venture to kind of also start producing the product in Nigeria.
So far, 34 African countries have sealed the pact and are ready to trade among themselves.
The free trade area will cut tariffs on 90% of goods and services to boost intra-African trade. Companies like CASAPERCO are now finding ways to make their products compete better with other African brands that could flood the Ghanaian market as the AfCFTA comes into force.
Ghana's government says it's trying to raise awareness on how enterprises can take advantage of the African Continental Free Trade Area. Still, experts say more has to be done to realize the full potential of the trade deal.
You also need to help build the capacities of the enterprises so they become competitive. So I think that is where we still need to further engage, and we are still engaging as to how we can help our individual enterprises to really do big ticket business, expand and operate in a way that enables them to produce on large scale so that the cost per unit will be lower, and then they can export to the African market.
Enterprises like CASAPERCO want the government to also reduce the lending rate. They say this can help them reduce the cost of their products in order to compete better with other foreign brands. For now though, they hope the AfCFTA will help drive the change in the way Africans trade among themselves. Nabil Ahmed Rufai, CGTN, Accra, Ghana.
And in some international news, China's customs data shows that the country's export maintained a steady growth in 2020, and that's despite disruptions which were caused by the coronavirus pandemic. Now, Wang Mingjie breaks down the data for us in this report.
Facing unprecedented headwinds from the virus, officials say China's foreign trade sector did a stellar job in 2020.
China's foreign trade is up 1.9%, reaching over 32 trillion yuan, or nearly $5 trillion in 2020. Among this, China's exports have reached nearly 18 trillion and imports have reached over 14 trillion, becoming the only major economy to see growth this year.
The epidemic dealt a heavy blow to China's foreign trade. In the first 2 months of 2020, the total foreign trade in goods fell over 9% year-on-year in yuan terms. But the declining trend was soon reversed amid China's containment of COVID-19 over the following month.
The sound recovery momentum has been sustained. Since June, China's foreign trade has achieved robust growth 7 months in a row.
With the sector's recovery on solid ground, China has introduced a series of reforms to open up its economy.
Although restrictions were in place due to the containment of the virus, China's exports of epidemic prevention materials has been valued at over 400 billion yuan. The country has offered antivirus supplies to more than 200 countries and regions worldwide, contributing to the fight against COVID-19 on a global scale.
COVID-19 is having a significant impact on the global economy. Experts say openness and cooperation is more needed than ever for global and sustainable economic recovery. They say China's commitment to broader reforms and wider opening up will continue to inject fresh growth opportunities to the global economy. Wang Mengjie, CGTN, Beijing.
And that's all for now on Africa Live Biz. But coming up on Global Business Africa, the African Union secures 270 million vaccine doses at a time when the coronavirus is infecting about 30,000 people a day. Of course, more on that coming up top of the hour. For now, back to you, Lindy.
Thanks, Uche. Well, time now for a short break, but still more news ahead on Africa Live. Coming up, we look at how Tunisians are developing cosmetics from fruit. How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice. Cactus pear or prickly pear is a common fruit in Tunisia. But an entrepreneur in the North African state is now tapping into this organic fruit by extracting its vegetable oil for sale in the health and cosmetic industry. Here's Adnan Chouachi with more.
Ibtihal Mbarak is one of the most talented and successful businesswomen in Tunisia. For several days each week, she drives for miles to reach her farm in the town of Benin from the coastal governorate of Monastir in northeastern Tunisia. It's at this farm where she harvests the prickly pear fruit, which takes place after months of patience. The stems of the fruit produce tons of the colorful and succulent organic Barbary fig.
The organic prickly pear fruit picking season starts in September and October. I usually test the quality of the fruit to know if it has reached maturity to produce the required sugar level that will help in the natural fermentation to transform it into vinegar. I also look at the number of seeds. If one picks the fruit too early, the quantity of oil in the seeds is not profitable.
After several years of research, Dr. Ibtihal Mbarak realized that prickly pear offers multiple possibilities. This fruit can be entirely utilized, starting with the fruit to the flowers, as well as the leaves. Whenever she returns to her company, the founder and CEO of Herbalia Natural Care wears her white lab coat as she prepares to start the long process of extraction of Barbary fig oil and vinegar. The prickly pear oil, which is also known as Barbary fig, is extracted without any chemical treatment.
I receive the fruits from the farms. The organic produce is washed, peeled in the machine, then the juice is separated from the seeds. The juice is stored in large cisterns until natural fermentation occurs to produce vinegar. The collected seeds are dried and stored. Later, I grind the seeds, filter, then bottle the liquid.
The microbiology researcher says that recent findings of a clinical study conducted by the Tunisian Market Access Project for Agri-Food and Local Products, PAMPA, shows the benefits of prickly pear seed oil in cosmetics are very promising. The 28-day clinical study was conducted on 20 women aged between 45 and 65. 97% of the volunteers confirmed their satisfaction with the product and expressed their intention to continue using it.
The oil is rich in omega-6, omega-3, omega-9 and vitamin E antioxidants. The anti-blemish, anti-dark circles, anti-wrinkle and firming virtues of the oil have been confirmed. A skin tolerance test was also conducted under dermatological supervision, confirming that this oil is tolerable and does not cause any adverse effects. The cosmetics are recognized for the anti-aging and moisturizing properties of the skin because the oil is rich in essential fatty acids, while the vinegar is used for weight loss.
There are some 200,000 prickly pear plants in Tunisia. The North African state is the world's top producer and exporter of Barbary fig oil. Over 40 domestic companies operate in this sector. Ibtihal's enterprise also produces cosmetics from natural herbs. With the support of her husband and family, this entrepreneur is hopeful to export its products to the international market. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, town of Benin, Monastir, Tunisia.
And coming up in your sports news, up next. We bring you the story of Dennis Ombachi, a Kenyan rugby player turned chef.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
In your sports news, we begin with rugby. Dennis Ombachi shot to fame when he scored the winning try that sent Kenya's revered rugby sevens team to the Rio 2016 Olympics. But the star, who has been involved in the game for over a decade, is now making waves as a chef whose culinary genius is causing a stir online. CGTN's Joy Kiruki has more.
Like many notable Kenyan internationals, Dennis Ombachi started his rugby in high school. He turned professional thereafter, and his club career got off to an emphatic start.
Sotito Duke spotted me, told Africa Yange and George Mboy outside there that, oh, that young village over there has some potential. I remember my first drill and it's still the book I read up to now. So it was a hit and spin. And I just couldn't get it right, but after 1 hour, 45 minutes, I managed to get it, and it has never, it stuck in my mind up to today.
Within no time, Ombachi became an established regular in Kenya's HSBC World Rugby Sevens Series squad. His name was immortalized in folklore when he grounded the winning try that sent his country to the Rio 2016 Olympics. Kenya sank Zimbabwe 21-17 in the finals of the 2015 Africa Cup Sevens in South Africa to clinch the dream ticket.
The first Zim defender came to me, of course, a slap on the face. The second one, a slap. And after that second handoff is when it hit me that, okay, now you have over 60 meters to sprint and the road is clear. So I just started sprinting, then I saw the Zimbabwe number 9, we used to call him Salamba, short guy cross-covering. Initially, I wanted to just sprint straight up to the try line, but again, I was like, okay, the number 9 Salamba is coming, he's pretty quick, let me step back in. So I stepped back in, and once he was out of my way, I was 100% sure no one else in that team can catch me.
As a member of the globe-trotting Kenya's Sevens team, Ombachi acquired a taste of different cuisines from around the world.
A teammate of mine, Ben Nyambu, who's now retired, bringing finesse in your cooking, I got it from him. Because I remember he's the first person I saw making a tuna sandwich using onions and mayonnaise, and I was like, by the way, so food actually is just mixing a combination of textures and flavors, and then so I learned a lot from him. Let's see, simple, basic, roasted potatoes. Not even.
Having researched widely to master his new cooking passion, Ombachi has now grown his culinary brand on social media. He's known as the roaming chef of Instagram and has expanded his kitchen into making and selling his own sauces.
I think the idea also came to me during the COVID period. I was like, okay, how do I make extra money? And my girlfriend said, your sauces are good, sell them. There was a lot of resistance before I actually started selling the sauces. So I started with 2, I think, and now I have almost 8.
Now a father and social media influencer, in addition to his professional rugby and cookery, Ombachi is aiming at serving another Kenya's Sevens delight at the Tokyo 2020 Olympics in what could be his swan song with the team. Joy Kiruki Juma, CGTN.
To football now. Aston Villa's home match against Everton